Right, I think we'll get going. Okay, welcome everybody to our series of TeachMeets. This is TeachMeet number 2. If you were on the last TeachMeet, I was in the middle of flu last time, so I only vaguely remember it, to be fair. But we're going to be more on it today. If you did miss the last one, it is available on YouTube, and that was High Challenge at Key Stage 3, that one. So you can go onto YouTube and watch it. This one is also being recorded and will also be found on YouTube in a couple of days' time. So you feel free to go back and watch yourselves, speakers. I can never do that myself personally, but you know, you might want to. But certainly feel free to share with other networks and let people know if you find the session useful that they can go back and watch later. So today's session, my purpose was to try and get people to think about how they can develop their use of examples and case studies at Key Stage 4 so that there is more connection between place. Quite often teachers are teaching one little element of a place as part of a case study, and students are getting a very one-sided or one angle, single story view of a location. And really, as geographers, we need to try and avoid that. We need to try and develop the connected geography idea of, you know, places have got a multifaceted, there's lots of different things to talk about them, and we should try and touch upon different elements of that. So we've got 6 different speakers today, some of which are talking a bit more generally, others are giving us very specific place examples and how they use them across topics. And we're going to kick off with Hope. Hope is in her 3rd year of teaching. The Hope, I feel like you're so much more experienced than that. She just started a new job, is that right, at Finchley Catholic High? Which I actually know because I grew up in that area. And is a very, very active core member of the Decolonising Geography Collective, and is doing amazing things there and really driving things forward, which is amazing to see. Hope is going to talk about pitfalls of using Africa as an example, things to be thinking about, something which is really close to my heart, really, really important. So Hope, I'm going to hand over to you. You can share your screen.
Perfect.
You know if it's working.
Yes, it should. Let's see. Okay.
I'm going to give a chance for people to ask questions at the end of each speaker if you wish to. You can either put them in the chat or you can just unmute, put your hand up. I'll try and monitor it as best I can.
Hopefully it loads up okay.
Yep, that's perfect. We can all see that.
Amazing. Okay, so just as a disclaimer, a lot of what I'm going to be showing, it's probably things that I've learned as or benefited from learning as a result of the Decolonising Geography group and the input that I've had through that. But the topic that I was going to cover today was how do we teach about Africa within Key Stage 4? Now, oftentimes, when I speak to students, they often, without meaning to, they'll refer to Africa as a place without really understanding that it's not just Africa as a continent is a lot more diverse, it's a lot more segregated, and actually, oh, there we go. We need to encompass and think about how actually it's made up of 54 states, and every single country in itself will have regions within it that are very distinct and diverse. And so place really matters in Africa. It's not a generalized space at all, just like with any location. So what's the issue? Time and specification. So we as teachers, we often lack time, and the specifications often place geography or place Africa within a particular context, mainly around like economic development, referencing to it within that context. And in doing so, it creates the opportunity for generalizations. And so that's definitely one of the issues. The second issue is around the concept of powerful knowledge. And so this concept has been running through geography for the last decade or so. And there was a really awesome critique of the concept of powerful knowledge that was done by Winter et al. And you've got the reference there. But if you wish to look it up, it was in a previous kind of edition of geography. And in that paper, it kind of unpicks how powerful knowledge kind of leads to lots of challenges, or the concept of powerful knowledge leads to lots of challenges, such as highlighting or creating controlled comparisons of places, often with in the context of teaching Africa, oftentimes that will then be Africa would be the kind of the tale of what not to do, or the tale of like what's gone wrong, or so on and so forth. And that creates like quite harmful narratives. The oversimplification of complex systems, complex situations, and the devaluation of everyday knowledge that your children, like students in the classroom, would have. And so powerful knowledge as a concept really does play into how we misrepresent and fall into common pitfalls when teaching about the continent of Africa or African contexts. So whereas at university, we have learned, or like at university level, there's been a sense of embracing discursivity, so being able to discuss, understanding concepts, and the understanding of a place being distinctive and difficult to compare directly, just because of all the different factors that have gone into that place. And then there's the critical analysis of power relations that happen at university. Now, obviously, we're talking about Key Stage 4, and I do think that we can still engage in all of those different things in a particular way within Key Stage 4 still, so that we're avoiding those pitfalls. And then next, we've got, so there's when teaching about countries from within the African context, Africa as a whole, and I say this as having read up on it, but also my heritage is African. But there is a distinctly like a distinct difference between African philosophical context. So the ideas and the sort of like ideologies around the African way of doing things, and that will be different per country. That's not to say it's a general thing, but it's distinct in comparison to European ideologies. So, for example, you've got the Ubuntu and the Harambe philosophies, and that oftentimes it helps those two philosophies in particular. They're just two examples, mainly kind of centered around like Southern African context countries, and they emphasize community, mutual respect, and collective effort. Now, those are not to say that they're not present in European ideologies, but that's very much in contrast to individualistic and sort of economically minded or driven ideologies as such. And so bearing in mind that there are those different philosophies, actually, how do we teach about that or convey that in our teaching of African nations, and do that well to to represent the context well? And then lastly, or not quite lastly, but we're getting there. In 2002, UK parliamentary report found that there was a deficit framework operating in regards to the representation of Africa in the GCSE geography curriculum. And also in Ofsted 2003 report found that places in Africa are too often only taught about through the lens of economic development, and classroom resources reproduce outdated and inaccurate views of place. Africa as a continent, and even in different countries and different communities, it is oftentimes, I like when looking through old textbooks, even from 10 years ago, it's so outdated. And so we need to make sure that we are teaching that well. And there is another blog post that I can share in, like, if anyone would like the resource, I can share in the notes page about how to write about Africa, which is a blog post that kind of guides individuals on how to do that. But also all of the above, with the issues that we find with teaching on Africa, we need to get creative. And so I've taken inspiration from different places, including Salam Geographia, and the ideas around geographical imaginations. And to do that, I'm going to begin with the idea of that if jollof rice in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Togo, and Kenya, Senegal, and Malawi, if they're all different, so too must their geographies, and those dishes are very different in all those countries. And so how do we teach better? How do we teach the African context better? We do that through front loading historical context that doesn't center around colonialism, because every single African context. It was present. There were communities and people groups there before colonialism arrives, and so we need to be teaching about that as well. Ensure to incorporate resistant movements as well as within the narrative, because there are always resistant movements involved. Within the context of teaching in different African contexts. So it might not be appropriate within every single context that you're teaching a African country within, but it could be an opportunity to look for other places to teach it within the particular curriculums that you have. Take the time to read up, to learn about the places that you teach about, drawing on Indigenous voices or of those of the diaspora who will have links to the knowledge present, even drawing on the knowledge in your classroom. So for many of you, you will have individuals who are from all parts of the world. And so asking, just opening it up to the class and saying, oh, does anyone know anything about this country? Is anyone from this country and can share or feel happy to share? That is definitely something to consider doing as part of your pedagogy. But really interesting books that I've been reading recently. This one's quite like a popular kind of text at the moment, but it's An African History of Africa by Zainab Badawi, and within that book particularly, they've incorporated lots of resistant movements that you can draw on. You can look at fiction text, so The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abidare, sorry, my voice, Abidare. That's located in Nigeria and it gives a good context. You could encourage your children to read it if they're learning about Nigeria in particular. And also try to include proverbs from different countries. So such as there was an Ethiopian proverb from the recent Decolonizing Education for Peace in Africa project. It brought together lots of the indigenous knowledge, and they drew on proverbs quite a bit in terms of how they went about the project. And Ethiopian proverb of when the webs of a spider join together, they can trap a lion, was one that stood out to me. That was in terms of that sense of community, of coming together and drawing on one another. And there could be lots of opportunities as you're teaching, maybe as a hook within the lesson to kind of just exemplify or kind of just share a bit more of that African philosophy context. Could you include Indigenous voices in the lessons that you teach? So maybe news reports from the particular countries themselves. So for example, here I've got Kenyan TV news talking about like a glass waste initiative. And then here's one from Rwanda, so Umunganda community activities. Both of these are the indigenous TV networks. Not all of the news will be in English, but there's definitely enough of it in English that you can get the gist of what's being said and draw on the knowledge that's there. And also it's a great content to unpick with students, and also promotes the appreciation and value given to individuals speaking English with a different accent, which I think is something that we just don't give voice to enough as well. Not that, yeah, I think in some contexts we do need to give voice to that as well. And then also consider what stories are the images that you show, or what stories are they telling? So for example, on here, coming to the end, a picture here is of Makoko, the informal settlement in Nigeria that is on Lagos Lagoon. And here, this image alone, it's quite drab. You could have, in terms of what I take away from that is that it looks quite old Victorian-like, like pre-industrial kind of vibe. But that's not what's happening here in Lagos at all. That actually is quite indigenous. It's not indigenous, rather. There's lots of community, lots of joy, lots of obviously they have their challenges, but I think it's more communicating that these are real communities, these are real people who are facing challenges, but they're facing them with resilience and innovative ways of managing the challenges that they find, and also lots of opportunities that are present as well. So yeah, make sure that you ask questions, that you're open to critique. I have a lot of thanks to give to a friend from the Decolonizing Geography network who went and took the time to look through these slides. It's a really important practice. So yeah, if you ever want some, yeah, just join the subject specialist groups for great learning spaces. But yeah, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Hope. Really important things to also get people thinking about examples that they use. And I just want to reiterate the use of voices in your own classroom. If you've got a diverse classroom, then please do use the students, but don't assume that they know about places either. I tend to open, we have an Africa unit in year 7. I tend to open with who has been to a location we're talking about and let them tell us, because you can't have that assumption that just because they are from a certain place that they have actually been there. They may not have. Thank you so much, Hope. Brendan, can we pass over to you? While you're setting up, I'm going to introduce Brendan. Now, I did sort of ask people for information to introduce them in case I didn't know them. I do know Brendan. And if I was to go through everything that Brendan's done for the geography community over the years, I would be speaking for 10 minutes myself. Brendan is an absolute superstar. He's been teaching a long time. Only a few years more than me, though. Very experienced head of department, but he's done other roles as well. But he now, for the community, supports a lot of people. He's written lots of books, contributed to websites. He is one of our GIS gurus and all-round fabulous geographer. So when you're ready, Brendan, pass over to you.
Thanks, Ina. Blimey, I don't know whether I can live up to any of that at all. I'll press share and get on with it, I think. It's probably
Please
the best
do.
thing to do. So, if I just show you that, can you see that screen now?
Yeah, all good.
Excellent. Okay. Just a brief introduction to myself there, because everyone's going to get the PowerPoints afterwards, I presume. So you can digest all of these things later. Main aim today is just to give you some idea of how we can see geography happening, how we can actually bring it alive and visualize things using GIS and GeoGIFs in particular. So just going to have a look at why that's the case. Just going to remind you of something that says that the government says in the national curriculum about GIS. Let you read that for yourselves. What might be surprising is that this is from Key Stage 1 and 2. And if we look at Key Stage 3, we see further mentions, and Key Stage 4, we have 7 mentions of GIS. But a lot of people don't realise is it's something that's been on the national curriculum for a very long time, well over 10 years. And yet we have seen with the Bearings report last year, there's a lot of concern that maybe GIS isn't happening quite as well as it should. So in Bearings last year, we had comments like this: geographical information systems were not on most secondary schools' curriculums, despite being part of the national curriculum at this phase. And the 2 areas where teachers reported needing more CPD were in planning fieldwork and using GIS. Lack of professional knowledge of these areas is a major barrier to improvement. So when that came out, that report, it was a rather bleak moment, really, because people were thinking, oh, is this really the state of play? And maybe there was some truth in that. I think that there have been a lot of very good responses since then, and I'm involved in some of those. One I can tell you about in particular, which will be available next year, is that the Oak National Academy are producing resources for GCSE. They're also producing resources for Key Stage 3, and they've produced resources to Key Stage 1 and 2. All of them will be making a really special effort to embed GIS, and I'm involved in that project myself. So particularly the Key Stage 4 GCSE. So just give you a few hints as to how that sort of thing might happen. If we move on to have a look at, here's a little case study for you of a place, and it's a place that I didn't know very much about, but we can actually use GIS to actually go and visit places and visualize what's really going on there. This is a place in South America, in Bolivia, and it's in the headwaters of the Amazon. So you can see the Amazon, the mighty Amazon over there flowing, broadly west to east into the Atlantic Ocean. And this is just one of many fairly massive tributaries. This is one of the smaller tributaries, which I wouldn't be surprised if it dwarfs the River Severn and the Thames, even though it's only quite small by comparison. And what we've got here is that Google Earth, which I've always used a lot, has revamped a bit recently. And they always had a thing called Google Earth Engine where you could look at time lapses, and they were really quite good, but they were a bit blurry. But now they've improved markedly. So I'm just going to give you a glimpse of what's available now, and you could use this live in a classroom. The kids would not need to be sat in front of computers themselves. You can use GIS from the front, and that's one of the things we'd recommend, because it's access to computers for all students is widely known as a big issue. So why not use GIS from the front? So, and you can also use that in resources that you give them later. So here's just an example of what's available. So I've just recorded my use of Google Earth just earlier on today. You can see that it zooms in like this, and then you've got the option of going to different places and looking at them with historical imagery, going back in time, comparing it with now, and then you've got time lapse. So what we have here is the river, and it starts in 1984. I'll just zoom it back to 1984, and you can see the river looked like that. This is the river that we're looking at there in Bolivia, and we can see its development over nearly 40 years, about 38 years. So if I just let that play through. Now I recorded that as just an MP4. It could be converted into a GIF or a GeoGIF and then used by students. We'll talk about how in a moment. What we can see is that's one stretch of the river, and you may have noticed something happening in one corner of it. Now let's look at another stretch of the river a little bit further downstream, and we see something else happening. So it's not just about a tidy development of river meanders and oxbow lakes and so on. There are other things going on, as I'm sure you can spot. There's an awful lot of deforestation going on around here. And this is just on one headwater of the River Amazon. Just look a little bit further, and we see by the end of that stretch, over a 38, well, in this case, 36-year period, it's looking a bit messy. So this is a very good way to actually not just look at the physical geography of what's happening, but also to look at, the human impact on these areas and how the human impact might indeed be contributing to the development of the river and its meanders in that area. So that's a really quite new thing from Google Earth, which is great. Now, how do you use those sort of things? Well, here's one, as the sample of Peter I made earlier. This is an animation I made last year, and it's a similar sort of idea, but it's giving you some idea of how you can actually use this with students. So this is a GIF, a GeoGIF. So I videoed the animation that was going on, and then used this, put it into a PowerPoint for students, and then added details as follows. So you can let them see this, you can discuss this with students, get them thinking about what's happening. Then you can start to, if you're going to use this in class or as independent learning, you can start to scaffold the resource. So I've added there the direction of flow, because sometimes that's something students get confused about, and teachers, to be honest, including myself. So I checked the direction of flow, and then you can add a table there for them to fill in the gaps. But that might be a bit challenging, so you can scaffold it with some keywords which they could include. Again, this is something you could use from the front, individual study, homework, whatever. And then we can move on to have a look at the answers in case you couldn't do any of those. And so we've got an example there of how that can be done. You could do that with the Google Earth animations as well. Here's another example. This is another river in Peru, similar idea, slightly different approach this time. This time we can add not only the direction of flow, we can put some numbers on. Ask the students what's going on at each of these locations. Could be used, say, as a retrieval practice. Think, pair, share. In a similar way, we can add a table and say, okay, what's going on at number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, with, again, some scaffolded words as necessary. And I'm sure you've all got the answers, but in case not, there's an answer sheet there. So we've got that as examples there, and some people may be watching this program. If I could see you, I'd ask you to put your hands up, and I'm sure some of you would put your hands up and say, yes, I'm watching this. But in case not, it's a very good series by Brian Cox, but we can link that to geography. How? Similar idea, we can now look at rivers on other planets. This is the Asuga Valleys on Mars. As you could use this extension task, application of knowledge that students have learned about rivers. We can see that that's going on Mars. What's going on at these locations? Think about what's happening at each of those places. Scaffold the task. Add some extension questions. This is just a way of using these kind of animations. I'm going through this very quickly, obviously. And once again, we've got some answers there in case anyone needs a little bit of reminders about those things. So there's some examples of how you can use GeoGIFs. And what I thought I would do, if we still have time, is share a couple of other things. Hina, do we have a couple of minutes?
We are a little tight, so if you can do
Okay.
it really quickly, that'd be good.
Really quickly, okay. Right. Another thing I discovered recently is a thing called Lat Long Connect, which will send you the links for. What you can do is type anywhere in the world. So, for example, this is Antalya in Turkey, and it shows you which places have the same latitude and longitude anywhere in the world. So it's always interesting to show that Turkey, for example, Antalya, is actually as far east or as far west, whichever way you like to look at it, as parts of Finland, which is often a shock to people. That's quite a useful resource to use. And then another thing I discovered recently is called British Place Name Mapper. And if you're looking at UK identity, if you're looking at north-south divide, can be quite a useful thing to look at. So I just put some words in here. It's the 5th of November today. I typed in Guy, Bon, Fire, Night to see which place names would have associations with those. And you can see an interesting geographical distribution of those words. We can do similar thing with these words. These are Welsh words, or words, sorry, not all Welsh words, to do with glaciation. Coombe, Corrie, Tarn. We see Corrie, as you might expect, dominant in Scotland, Tarn, Lake District, and then Coombe in Wales. And then city, town, village, hamlet, if you're doing settlement hierarchy. Again, we see interesting distribution of those. You can zoom in and out on that map and have a look in detail about those. And finally, places to do that end SBY, which is a very distinctive Viking legacy or Norse legacy in our place names. You can see nearly all of them are in northeast England. You can see roughly there a sort of north-south divide from those place names. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brendan, showing us how we can use GIS much more easily than we might think, but also that idea, the different take on place, because it's taking the theory and things that we want to teach students and locating it in a place, and that just makes it more contextual for them, and that connection between what they expect to find and actually seeing it on a map, seeing it in locations is really, really important. Thank you so much, Brendan. So we're going to go to Alice next, who hopefully has, I think you said your technology is okay, and hopefully is still okay. Alice, if you're ready to start sharing, I will just introduce you while you do that. So Alice is a relatively new head of department at an Essex school. She is full of fab ideas that are really easy for other teachers to take away. And she's a superstar in that she's perfectly happy to share those ideas, which is absolutely brilliant. It'd be nice if you got my screen off your screen though. Instead of looking at myself. She's going to talk about using one example across different topic areas and how we would embed the understanding of one place to teach lots of different things. So when you are ready, Alice. Assuming you know you're still muted.
That's better. Okay, can you see my
Perfect.
screen okay now? Yes. Okay, great. So basically, yeah, that's me. I've been on HOD since September, and I'm here to chat with you a case study that we use through multiple different topics at GCSE. So the GCSE courses, these quite sort of little topics, well, not really little, but certainly separate in my view, but I much prefer to see geography like this. They're all completely interlinked, and they're much messier in reality than what the GCSE course and the way it's examined sets out. And so we use this case study from Fields of Life over 2 topics to help reduce content load, but also to help pupils think across different topics as well. So I used to work for this charity, so it was a really good case study for me because I knew so much about it already, and so I was able to bring in this new idea into the department and share this new and better example that they compared to what they were doing beforehand for this. And so the charity works in education, providing school places and schools, child sponsorship, water projects like sanitation, water filters, rain capture, and also wells, and then also their new side, which is Enterprise, which is a vocational training college to give skills to local people. So with 49 million people in Uganda not having access to clean water, and we could look at it as a real problem, a real negative issue, and it is in one way, but also the way we want to try and get this across the pupils, thinking about how we portray places, is we want to keep this example very hope-filled and very positive, and seeing it as a real solution to really benefit people, rather than looking at it in a really negative view, oh, look at them per them. And so that's the mindset that we go into with this example. So this is the activity that we work around with this case study. We watch a little video summary, which I have QR coded there, so you can watch it in your own time. And we do a little 4W summary, who, what, where, and why. And then we use a little, what I call a honeycomb or hexagon note structure in their notebook, and they set it out just like this. And what I really want them to learn about is more than just a sustainable water supply. There's more than just the benefits of clean water here. It's just 1/6 of the whole project. And so just sort of go through the project with you. Obviously it provides clean water, which is an issue, but also we can think about the health, because unclean water can obviously lead to lots of preventable illnesses, and that having clean water helps to reduce that greatly. Also women, it is a women's role in that community, in that culture, to do the water collection, often with the children as well. And so actually having wells that are in the community, in the village, rather than women spending many hours collecting water, that helps them spend more time in economic activities, making money, attending school or college, or doing other more productive work, earning money. That's really beneficial to them as well. But also there is an issue around sexual violence, sexual assault, around the topic of women at the collecting water. So there was actually women in danger because of it. So the well keeps the women in the local community, in the village, and much safer for them as well. Education, they learn lots about sanitation, about good hygiene practice, and the benefits of clean water. The maintenance part is probably my favourite part of it, is that local people are trained with the skills to help maintain this well project. So they have the skills to fix it, so they're not reliant on other companies or people further away, and so they can fix it and maintain it for themselves. And then we discuss with the pupils with the benefits of that, and being much more independent as a community, rather than aid reliance and relying on organisations to come and fix it for themselves. The money part is also something I really stress with the pupils, is that yes, there's an initial investment from the charity, they're about £10,000 through lots of fundraising, etc. But actually local community families, they pay a small subscription, a tiny amount, And again, we talk about this idea of how it makes it financially sustainable, because then again, that makes the community far more independent, so they can then pay for the maintenance of this well themselves. They then don't need the charity as much as maybe they would have if they were reliant on the charity continually funding and financially supporting this well. So yeah, as well as water provision, it provides a whole range of different things to help support the community rather than just water. And so it's about making this idea of sustainability is just a much bigger idea than just having clean water. Okay. So then the sorry, how do I go back? The next area of the topic that we look at is strategies to reduce the development gap. So we bring this idea in again. I play them the little video again because it's about 6 months between first playing it in year 10 and then watching it again in year 11. And I put the key points basically back up on the slide and so that they've got the information there, so we're not having to teach the case study twice. But what we get them to think about is how is this actually connecting to the development of the local community, but also Uganda as well. And we could get them to think about something, a really simple chain of events like better water quality, less disease, higher life expectancy. But actually we want them to think more like this. And I put this up on the board for them, and I want them to make as many chains as possible. And so they're really thinking widely and deeply about this one project. Again, that it's not just providing clean water, it is far, far bigger than just providing clean water. And so I give them a little competition about how many chains they can make, but also who can make the chain with the most components in it. So they're thinking like a spider web rather than just simple chains, and that what they might have previously done. So yeah, lots more ideas also in the Fields of Life website. I use this charity again at IB, where we look at microfinance and also other strategies for addressing the sustainable development goals. So they've got lots of other opportunities within the charity that you can also go and explore that maybe might fit an opportunity into your scheme of work for a case study. So yeah, hopefully that's giving you some food for thought on how you can make the most out of one case study and how you can get pupils to think more deeply and critically about just one project.
Thank you so much, Alice. Absolutely perfect example of connection with another with a charity, but also just that developing the deep thinking that we want at GCSE. And I definitely would love to use that example. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. Next up, Catherine Owen. Now, as I said before, on my submission Google form, it says, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself. Catherine put on hers a HOD in Somerset. Catherine clearly has done a lot more than being just a HOD in Somerset. Catherine is an author, has written quite a lot of different books within the geography community that people use, and is also current vice president of the Geographical Association, and has a lot more to offer on top of that. I'm just going to brief you that Catherine is going to talk about use of Sahara Desert as a case study across different sections. Now, people have been talking about GCSE specs they teach, but obviously these examples could apply to any specification. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Hina. And yeah, here I am, being head of department in Somerset, and I have my amazing co-head of department, Karen, sat here with me as well. So shout out to Karen, who is absolutely amazing. So I'm hoping that I can get my screen to share okay, because this is a bit of a nightmare sometimes because I'm on a browser. Oh no, if I made it infinite.
Not quite worked.
Right, okay, can you see it now?
Not yet.
Oh no, why can't you see it? Right, just a sec. Let me try again. This is because I'm on the browser. Sometimes it plays up. So I want it to share my screen.
I know you sent me one as well. I've just opened it up. So I've got two things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was worried. Is it coming up now?
I've just moved away from the screen. Not yet.
No. Right, Brendan, you're the technical whiz kid. What am I doing wrong? Right, just a sec. If we can get it up on the screen.
When you go to share, it'll probably have a choice of screens. So you have to choose whichever one has got the
Yeah,
stuff you want to show?
I've got a window,
No?
right? That might do it. That might do it. It's because I'm on the browser rather than
Yeah.
is that done it?
Yeah, that's it.
Woo! Got there eventually. I'm so sorry. It's if I'm using proper Zoom, I'm fine. But
And then go to slideshow mode.
yeah, is
Yeah,
that
I was just about to start mine, but yeah, yours is working. So slideshow
is
mode,
it
bottom
working?
right
Yeah.
hand corner. We're not on slideshow mode yet. Bottom right hand corner. By the sound.
Working out my I think it's all laid out differently because I'm on the browser. So
Or go to slideshow and start slideshow on the top.
I've just got show taskbar, display settings, and end slideshow coming up.
Oh, on your screen, I can see where it says slideshow.
All right, where? Ah, it says I can't. I'm so confused. No.
Do you want me to share mine instead, and I can
Yeah, could
tell me
you?
when to move
Because
screen?
I'm
Yeah,
getting
1
confused.
second.
I couldn't see it saying slideshow. Sorry.
Is that working?
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, if you can share that, that'd be amazing.
You just have to tell me when to change slides.
Oh, thank you, Hina. You're an absolute superstar. Yeah, when I'm doing stuff at home, it's fine, but when I'm doing it through the browser at school, it all messes up every time. Yeah,
Okay,
so
and
right,
ask you to speed up on your talking. That would be
I will
amazing.
be super
Yeah, a
speedy.
little bit short.
So, incredible Sahara Desert. So, on to the next slide. So basically, we use Sahara Desert. Yeah, if we can go on the next slide, that'd be amazing. So we use the Sahara Desert across lots of topics. When you've got geographical thinking, it's all about interconnectedness and synoptic thinking. So by having a topic which runs through several topics, you are going to help students have that synoptic thinking. Also, if the students are encountering the knowledge, if you've read like Nuttall's book The Hidden Life of Learners, he says you need to come across something 3 times to be able to remember it. So if we keep coming back to something, they're going to remember it better. And also we're tackling the danger in the single story. We are giving them a richer view of a topic. So if we go on to the next slide. So we look at the Sahara Desert for AQA, the living world. So it's our hot desert we look at. But if you click again, we have got other topics that it also comes into. So when we're thinking about natural hazards, we've got the effects of climate change, we've got managing climate change. There are examples linked to the Sahara Desert, changing economic world, thinking about uneven development and resource management. So if we click on again, I'm going to go through each of these in turn quickly. So yeah, so I've put some hyperlinks on here because hopefully this PowerPoint will be able to be shared somewhere. But we've got a scheme of learning here from my geography department where we look at the Sahara Desert, and we use that for the whole of the deserts topic, not just for the case study, because all things like the characteristics of the desert, they can all be done through looking at the Sahara Desert. Now, one of my favorite activities is the choose your own adventure activity. Now, when I was a kid, you had these books where you could choose your own adventure. You could turn to page 17 if you wanted such and such to happen. And I thought, let's try doing this. I found a book about Bedouin people and a story of a couple, and I turned this into a choose your own adventure. And so students have got a mini movie that they watch, and again I've put the link into the mini movie, and they see what's happened to Mansour and Selwa, and then they have to think about what they should do next. And this is a Bedouin couple who are facing the challenge of, like, you know, the desert getting drier, and can they stay in the desert? So it explores opportunities of the Bedouin living in the desert, but also challenges facing Indigenous people. And it's built on the story of Indigenous people as told in a book that I adapted it from. So if we go on to the next slide. So then when we move on to resource management, our third topic in year 10, straight after Living World, one of the things we do is focus on energy. And that's a great opportunity to go back to the Sahara Desert. We can look at oil, we can look at solar power, and the very memorably named Benban Solar Park in Egypt is a really good example. Benban, it sounds great, the kids remember it. And this is a massive solar farm. You can see it there in the picture, and it is contributing towards Egypt's goal of using more renewables. So we've looked at the Sahara Desert when we are doing the Living World, but we're going back to it again when we're looking at energy. So if we click on to the next one, when we've looked at opportunities in the Sahara Desert, we've looked at hydroponics, and particularly in Egypt. So if we were focusing on food, we could link back to this and these amazing projects, which are great because it's taking indigenous wisdom of hydroponic farming and it's using it in a modern day context, reducing water consumption and allowing Egypt to be able to grow crops that normally wouldn't be associated with being in the Sahara Desert. Okay, if we go on to the next one, we've got a little bit about water. So again, if you focus on water, you can link that back to the desertification section of the ecosystems topic, where we've looked at the Sahara Desert, looking at the Sahel, looking at the impacts of water insecurity. And we can link that back to Mansour and Selwa, because their decision to whether to continue to live in the desert was being driven by the fact that water was so short. But there are more topics. If we hop onto the next slide, we can also link this in to natural hazards. We need to look at the effects of climate change. So we can refer back again. So we look at natural hazards at the start of year 11. We can refer back again to the Sahara Desert. We can look at Mansour and Selwa again. The Bedouin way of life is changing because of climate change. And this brings in another idea with teaching about different places, the idea of telling stories. This is a quote here. They do not just inform, they move, creating emotional openings. The children having a connection with Mansour and Selwa is going to make it much more real to them, the idea of having issues in different parts of the world. But we can also do more in natural hazards if we click on to the next one. We've got the idea of managing climate change as well. We can think about mitigation strategies in the Sahara, such as back to Benban again. Benban solar plant, we can think about planting trees. We can think about the way people in the Sahara are adapting to be able to cope with climate change with things like hydroponics and managing water supply. And there's also a great opportunity to tackle misconceptions. For example, the Great Green Wall, that project was failing because the idea of just plonking trees everywhere was not working. It wasn't until indigenous techniques for growing the trees were started to be used that they started to see success in this project. So we can tackle some of these misconceptions as well. And then lastly, moving on to changing economic worlds, we can look at uneven development. This is our second and final topic in year 11 because it's very complex. And we can look at uneven development in the Sahara. So we can think wider countries that have a significant chunk of them in the Sahara Desert. You know, why are they unevenly developed? We can think about physical, economic, historical conditions, bringing in ideas like colonialism. And a really important thing I think to look at is thinking about this link to international migration and the fact that if we have got poor conditions in some places, then that's why people are migrating. People aren't just migrating to Europe for the hell of it. We can start getting our students thinking about why are these people leaving? How is desertification in the Sahel causing issues? And we can tackle some of these misconceptions our students may have. And then finally, we can think about the Sahel area as well and areas near the Sahara Desert for reducing the development gap. This links in with what Alice was just saying about things like digging wells. Intermediate technology can involve sand dams, terracing, planting trees, all things that are used by an organisation called Sand Dams Worldwide, used in places like northern Kenya, Ethiopia. And so you can explore intermediate technology whilst also linking back to your Sahara Desert case study. And you can also use Sahara and the Sahel to look at aid as well. So if we just click onto the next slide, that's the last one there. If you'd like me to share any of these resources with you, or if you've got any questions about anything, that is my email address, which is massively long. And that is my little tag there. I'm mainly on Blue Sky now. I still go on Twitter occasionally. Was I okay for timing?
Perfect. Thank you so much. I've just got to figure out how to
I'm so
unshare my
sorry
screen.
about the mess up at the start. I get awful problems with
Not a problem
these
at all.
things.
I'm just trying to figure out how to unshare my screen, which I haven't figured out yet. Fiona, if you can share your screen and just, you know, replace mine, that'd be really helpful, because you can do that. Thank you so much, Catherine. That's exactly what we're looking for, how to use one example across lots of different topic areas. I don't teach hot deserts, but if I did, definitely be using that as an example. It's absolutely fabulous. Next up is Fiona. Fiona is a head of department in Northampton. She is a GA award winner for a GA award for excellence in 2024. She's also had an RGS award as well. And she's just had a book out called 100 Ideas for Secondary Geography Fieldwork, which is well worth a look at, really, really helpful. And Fiona is going to also talk about teaching examples. So far, a couple of tips we've had, I think, have been AQA based. Fiona is, like me, an EduCast B teacher. So it shows that, you know, this is really relevant across whatever spec you teach. Over to you, Fiona.
Perfect, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so like Hina says, I do teach a different exam board. I do teach EduCast, that we are few and far between, but hopefully this example will be useful to you in other exam boards as well. Is it working? Can you see across, Hina?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. So I'm going to be talking about the country of Tuvalu. It is a case study which I have used ever since I started teaching. I recently wrote an article about it as well for Wide World magazine, if you subscribe to that. And hopefully that article will be useful if you do choose to use this case study. So some of the topics that we teach in EduCast are slightly different to the ones that you'll find at AQA, EdExcel, etc. And this year, what I really wanted to concentrate on in our GCSE was narrowing the number of case studies that we had. We got lots of examples all around the world, and that was great because we were giving students a really wide opportunity to learn about lots and lots of different places. But actually, could they really remember them? Could they make links between them? And we have a decision-making paper for paper 2, which is a paper that has no pre-release, but it is a synoptic paper where students are expected to pull on lots of different examples from across their course. And it got me thinking about how we could improve our scores in that paper. And I realised that we needed to use our case studies in a bit more of a clever way. We needed to make sure that we were teaching more about those case studies in different ways rather than just concentrating on one particular aspect of that area. So when I looked at Tuvalu, I was thinking about how we could use this because it is a case study that students remember really, really well. They get really interested in it. So I started to think about how we might be able to use that across our curriculum. So the first one, the most obvious one, is about looking at climate change and the solutions. So Tuvalu, if you're unaware, is a really low-lying, mostly coral atoll nation in the Pacific. And many of the islands there, are well populated. There are some which don't have anybody living on them, but it is an area which is at risk of climate change. There are climate change refugees. There are lots of people trying to find solutions and how they can help the people living there to stay living there. We also look at it in terms of the coastal communities. So one of the crossovers in the specification, which I'll show you in shortly, talks about the crossover between climate change and coastal communities. So it was an obvious use there. But then we thought, how else could we use it? On Tuvalu, there are no natural rivers. So drought has been a huge issue. There have been some quite sizable droughts in the last 15 years or so. We have extreme weather, so Cyclone Pam, for example, when that hit the Pacific Ocean or the Pacific Islands, that caused no end of issues for Tuvalu, Vanuatu. So we could use that as well. We can look at coastal protection, and obviously that lines up really well with the climate change solutions as well. Water resources, if there's no natural rivers, where are they getting their water from? How are they ensuring that people have good, clean drinking water, despite the saltwater incursion from the fact that it's a coral island? So the water rises up through the surface and lots of the soil and the water gets polluted by the seawater. But also in terms of development and aid as well. So across our specification, There are lots of different ways in which we could use Tuvalu as an example to show that we're not just looking at somewhere just because of climate change. Actually, there's lots of things that we can look at within that one case study. So the most obvious uses I've put up on the screen here. So these are some snips from our specification. So students need to look at climate change and coastal communities, the impacts of extreme weather events, and the consequences of climate change for people. And there's some bullet points that we kind of have to try and meet within there. So things like farming and food supply we study, wildlife and habitats, where people live, etc. So whilst those are the obvious ones, there are lots of other little examples that we can take a look at within there. So I was getting our students to do some reading around Tuvalu. I got them to do a quick Google. What was coming up when they Googled it? And I wanted them to try and find some kind of good news stories in and amongst what I knew were going to be the obvious stories that they were going to see. So we knew that we're going to have something about sea level rise, but actually we found some really good things about how people were adapting to the climate crisis. We found some of the solutions to climate change there. So in terms of the rising sea levels, what were people doing? How were other countries helping? But we also found how Tuvalu was then being tied into some pacts which they potentially didn't want to be. So there was a lot of reading around that students can do. And we know that for our top end students, that reading around the subject is so important. And because they really find Tuvalu interesting, and they really like listening to the people's stories from there, they get so drawn into it that they want to go away and read about it as well. So one of the things that we gave them was this image. So this is an image from a report on what is being done to try and help the people of Tuvalu. So we gave them this image and we got them to do kind of a close inspection of what they could see there, and how potentially raising the land might help people, how sustainable that might be. And then from this image, we then zoomed out from where it was to show what the area was like around it. So students were really thinking about how those, like what life might be like for a coastal community there. We looked at the picture and thought, actually, some of those homes look like they are owned by people with potentially good wages, and you know, they're living a fair distance back from the sea. Does it seem to be, does sea level rise seem to be impacting them right at this moment in time? Is it going to be something in the future? So we're asking lots of questions about this particular image, and we had a quick look through the report to see what was being done there, because there's some like before and afters in there. So giving them these images of a place that they've never been to, probably will never go to, and getting them to think kind of holistically about the whole area was getting them to think about all the different threads that we have throughout our GCSE. So why have we chosen to do this? Obviously, we could stick to having lots and lots of examples, but we really want to reduce the number of case studies that students will need to learn. We know that there are lots. So I think we counted about 40 examples that we could go through for our GCSE. It reduced that single story narrative. There could be just lots of bad news about climate change and bad news about sea level rise, but actually there were some real stories of hope in there as well. And that's what we wanted the students to understand. It's going to broaden students' knowledge of that location, which in turn deepens their understanding of the links between the different topics, which is perfect for that synoptic paper too. If anybody wants to have a look at my resources on Tuvalu, I'll be more than happy to share them. This is a work in progress at the moment about how we can use it across the broad number of topics, but it is something that we are really working on this year to reduce the number and to kind of expand students' horizons around that particular unit. Finally, then, it does, as I mentioned previously, it does encourage that wider reading. Students have been fascinated about some of the solutions that they're trying to put in place in Tuvalu, and they've gone away themselves and brought articles to me to say, Miss, have you seen this? Have you looked at this? Which is just fantastic. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that was useful, and I'm almost in time.
Thank you, Fiona. Again, another great example of using one location, and the educast aspect does lend itself really well to that, I think, as well. All right, we are at the end of our session. However, we do have one more speaker, so hopefully some of you can still hang on and not have to disappear too quickly. Iram is going to sort of round things up with sort of the overall importance of thinking about decolonizing, thinking about anti-racist geography, thinking about personal stories and how they link in with what we teach. Iram is a teacher. She's a PhD student. She's an important member of the Decolonizing Geography Collective, and she's also an educational consultant. So Iram, we are obviously running over time. So if you can speak fast to get through everything that you want to say, that would be amazing. Over to you whenever you're ready.
Sorry, guys, can you see the screen?
Yeah. You just
Okay,
not, it's
cool.
not on slideshow mode, but it is.
Is that okay? You can see it now, yeah?
Not on slideshow, but I can see the different slides. So it's not in slideshow mode.
Let me just try again. Can you see this?
Not in slideshow, but it is up there.
Am I still having,
Scroll
am
as it
I
is.
having that problem that Catherine had then?
Just go with it as it is.
Just like, okay, I'll just talk.
But you can still scroll down the slides. We can still see
Yeah,
them.
cool. Okay. So some of you have seen some of these slides before, which is great. I want to talk about anti-racism and decolonizing geography. So I'm going to just get deep into your heart today. So I'll keep it brief like that. I'm going to talk about the importance of actually getting to know your students through their personal geographies, because you'll find that it kind of helps you with their understanding of the different concepts within GCSE, especially those synoptic links. When you do this right at the start, when you first meet your GCSE students, you'll find that they engage with the course a lot more. So it's like simple questions like, who are you? Where is home for you? What connects you to the world? And what issues matter to you, local to global, and where you've visited? Do you have a heritage or culture? And where would you like to go? Although these questions seem quite simple, they're quite deep. And I just done these questions with some undergraduates as well, and they found them quite difficult. But obviously, when I showed them my own example, which I'm sure you guys can do as well, so you can have your own personal geographies, the parts that you want to share with your students, you can see that it kind of brings the world together and it makes sense of the different geographies that you're linked to. And then you can see the links that you might have with your class as well. So it's always important to read your room. There's some questions I can share with you, so I'm sure you can have this slideshow. These are the questions. These are actually to do with my PhD research as well. So I get people to not, when I say people, I mean teachers and also students, to actually have a go at this Who Am I activity, and then get them to make a little diagram of their own. Now you could do lots of things with this diagram. You can tabulate it later. I don't have an example here, but if you read my article, Decolonial and Anti-Racist Pedagogy Through Personal Geographies, you'll see how I've tabulated my own personal geographies and how you can do that with your students. And hopefully everyone will have their own unique sort of diagram. I'll skip that bit. So why do we need to decolonize? Now, there's certain things which we don't tend to talk about in the curriculum, and there's been papers written on this, like Steve Puttock and Amber Murray's paper, and they talk about how there's like a deafening silence of race and racism in the curriculum as we know it today. You know, so you need to think about how you actually talk about global issues, racial inequalities, the global South, student heritages. And it's great to see some of the examples today, how this is beginning to happen, but a lot more can happen as well. And then we might ask the question, you know, why is this important? Well, if we just have a look at the history of geography, we can see that, you know, there's a lot of discussion that we can have on colonization, which we perhaps don't, which will probably help the students make sense of why countries are in a situation in the situation that they're in, like economically and in terms of development. So it's like interesting to actually ask these questions, like who are these people? Like, what does it mean by roads must fall? And why are they controversial, and to who? And why are students not actually learning about the legacies of some of these figures in geography education? Because let's face it, a lot of colonization was attached to geography education. So the history of geography is really, really important in that context. And just to come back on textbooks, I'm going to briefly talk about this. You can actually critique a textbook with your students, and it really helps them develop their geographical understanding as well. Like the kind of criticality that they can engage with is, if you look at the blue box, it says ask the questions to maybe write to the author. Maybe they can rewrite a particular case study like one of my students did in the past. It will help them understand the location a bit better as well. Suggest better ways to represent a country. If you have students with heritages from some of those case studies that you teach, maybe you can kind of bring them in and sort of catch your students in rather than catch them out, and let students critique in whatever way they think is beneficial. Like this example is of a student who said, this is not a good representation of my country. So I said, what would you write to the author? How would you improve this case study, this idea of not having a single story? And then once I, was teaching GCSE, and this is the OCR from the OCR spec, ethnic foods in the UK, and there was a student who just turned around and said, "Nah, miss, is that all we are? Food shops and clothes?" And he was like a Asian heritage, South Asian heritage background. So again, what can the teacher do? The teacher can ask students to write to the author again. What improvements? Is that all Asians have done in this in the UK or in the world? And maybe suggest better ways to represent that place. Let students critique what they see again and ask, them what they already know and build on that knowledge as well. So I'm just going to also just talk a little bit about whiteness. I mean, let's face it, the subject is very white and colonial. How can we move forward from this? Like most of the positive images are white, and when I say whiteness, I mean that type of whiteness which is perpetuating racism. So we need to kind of have more representation of students that might have a heritage outside that sort of racial category as well. So like, for example, if you look at this conversation, so miss, why can't there be positive pictures of people like us? That's Abdi and Rima, these are pseudonyms, because they ain't written by people like us. So these are the kind of conversations that are happening in the classroom. How can we bring them alive? Like, do we just dismiss them, or do we actually say to the students, yeah, actually, you got a point. Let's talk about it some more. I'm just going to kind of summarize what decolonizing is for you. It's a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So as you can see, on one end, you've got the world, the what we've seen, the right side up, and then you've got it upside down. And the way in which we get to this position is basically acknowledge. This is taken from Patricia Daly's book, 2018. We need to acknowledge the damage actually caused by colonialism. All those case studies that we love to teach about. We need to talk about the colonialism that underpins some of those case studies, and also talk about the nuance, that moving beyond the single story, not just about diversity and inclusion and bringing in those extra resources, but actually embedding it within our understanding and our own minds, and be accepting change and new forms of knowledge production, even giving your students more autonomy. And just as a summary, because I'm conscious of time and I know it's been a long evening for many of us, I'm just going to show you a table which I'll share with you. It just kind of shows you, you can reflect on this, what is colonial and what is decolonial in the classroom. I'll just give about 3 or 4 examples. So colonial could be using a map without critique. Decolonial would be actually talking about the colonial legacies behind those maps and how they were made. Colonial might be crediting only white, European, Australian, North American scholars. Decolonial might be giving credits to Black, Indigenous, and global majority scholars. And knowing that, terms like Indigenous are spelt with a capital I, and so forth. And then those little things like microaggressions against students from Black and global majority heritages. Be careful, you know, when you're showing images about those countries, and be mindful about your classroom. So being decolonial would be learning about those different people, cultures, places, and just kind of going a little bit beyond your biases. If you want to know more about how to become an anti-racist teacher, geography teacher, you can read my article on this. I kind of explain this concentric model for you so that you can actually see where you are in your own journey into being more like an anti-racist geography teacher. Fear zone being not accepting there's a problem, and then the growth zone trying to do something about it. Learning zone, which I think I'm in, which majority of us are hopefully in, where we're just trying to learn new ways of knowing. Just to sum up, you know, we all share this world. We all have our own histories, geographies, beliefs, and knowledges. And we can learn about each other. So my motto is let geography breathe. And that's part of my PhD. Thank you so much for listening, and sorry for the rushed presentation.
Thank you, Iram. Sorry for rushing you.
That's fine.
Really important messages from Iram there. Something that's really, really important to me as well. And the importance it is to the students that you teach. If you include them in what you're teaching, acknowledge what they know, what they don't know, where they come from. We've got real diversity at GCSE across the country. We have not at A level or at degree level. And it's because students don't feel it's a subject for them. And if you embed these things when teaching about place, it's going to make it much easier for those students to want to carry on with the subject. Thank you so much, everyone, for giving up your time this evening. Hopefully you got something really useful from it. I will get the PowerPoints collated and hopefully sent out to everybody, or put in a central area where you can access them. This is on YouTube. If you want to pass it on to anyone else, it will be on there as well. The next one up in January will be based around connecting with other organisations. So I'm hopefully going to get people to speak from things like the Geological Society, Meteorological Society, etc., and what resources they can offer to geography teachers, free ones only, that are useful. So if anyone's got any ideas on people that you know, that you work with, that could talk on that, that would be absolutely fantastic. Please do keep up with everything the GA is doing. Conference is now available for booking, or it will be very soon. So you can book onto early bird prices for the conference, which is shaping up to be absolutely brilliant as well, even if I do say so myself. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Please do get in touch if there's anything you want to discuss, or if you want to take part in a future Teach Meet.